Hello. How's everyone doing? Getting pretty excited. We've got our one last live stream, at least last one for now, because I'm like 37 and a couple days, weeks pregnant. So we're going to take a little break on these live streams while I go on my maternity leave. But they have been really fun, and I'm really excited to do some more of these postpartum once I have my babe. So let's see if we can let's get Laura on here. We're going to do our last live stream. Here we go. Okay. We are going to be talking about sexual health. Here we go. He like tips me to the top of the screen whenever okay, there we go. We got it. Like the Brady Bunch.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, like cuts off my head when it goes up. So I'm like really, really close, like uncomfortably close. I'm gonna back up a little bit. No one needs to see me that close up. Okay. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm good. Just not and tired.
To be expected.
I'm I'm just tired. It's like that kind of tired where you can't like shake it with a cup of coffee or like you're just tired just all the time now. So there's that. But yeah, so we have our final live stream, and we're going to be talking about sexual health and hormonal changes, and how that affects the pelvic floor, and some things that people can be aware of, and maybe some action steps that they can take in order to facilitate and support all of these changes that might be taking place in the future, or have taken place in the past. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot of information out there, especially with like around hormones, but we know that it's a thing, but just trying to like sort out the information that's out there is really hard. So starting to like talk about it, starting to be aware of what your options are, because a lot of times, you'll get something that comes out and, we have like this knee-jerk reaction to like estrogen's bad, don't ever take it, you're going to get breast cancer. And then we start to actually research and invest the time. And then we start to realize that there are certain places for estrogen and certain ways, but there are a lot of different options. So
Yep.
Having enough information to ask the right questions is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, I feel like Google is like such an abyss. If you're having issues with hormones, you Google something, and it, like you're saying, it's a ton of information, but it's also like, what do you Google without getting weird? Like,
yeah. Yes, right.
But
also too, like, like thinking about like menopause, thinking about this whole perimenopause phase that can like last for a while. Like once you get into like your 30s and 40s, these are some things that you could be experiencing, especially where we're having babies approaching this time frame. So when we're postpartum, we're kind of in this hormonal change, and we're experiencing some of these like symptoms that are like perimenopause. We also might be kind of overlapping into that perimenopausal phase. So being able to kind of have a body awareness of what these symptoms look like and what they could be meaning and what your options are.
yeah, absolutely. And I think I've definitely heard that before, that being postpartum can really be akin to like a lot of the symptoms of approaching menopause, with the hormonal changes that take place, and some of like the issues that you may have with your sexual health, and some of the changes that you might be experiencing. So could you give us kind of an overview of, firstly, explain what perimenopause is? Because some people are like, what do you mean? I'm like 35. I'm not in menopause.
Yeah. So menopause typically, and it can be very different, and there can be things that cause menopause earlier, like if you have a surgery. There are different things that can affect this, and just different people can experience it at different ages. But a rough guideline is typically around 50 is when you're going to be approaching menopause. But like menopause is really kind of a short little time period because, technically you have hit menopause when you've had 12 months without a period, without having a menstrual cycle. So even if you've gone 6 months and then you have one, that whole kind of timeline resets. So you could be spending like 10 or so years in this perimenopause phase where you're experiencing the symptoms and you're noticing changes, and then you hit menopause technically when you have that 12-month period free time frame, and then you're in postmenopause. So, and being able to like, know all the good things, which are pretty intuitive, like nutrition and exercise and stress management and sleep, all those things, having tools, the earlier you start to navigate those and have resources for yourself, the easier that transition period is going to be.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so yeah, that's why it's good to know about it now.
Sooner rather than later than being caught out and being like, oh no, what's happening to me? I
Yeah,
didn't
now I gotta start exercising.
exactly. I think Dr. Christiane Northrup, have you read any of her books?
Mm-mm.
So she's amazing. It's spelled like Christiane, like CH, Northrup. She is an excellent advocate for women's health, and she wrote a book called The Wisdom of Menopause,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's really great. And it actually like kind of it's almost like talking you down off the ledge. Like just because you're experiencing menopause does not mean that this is like the end of your life. It just means that like you're going through another change, and it kind of helps you to like navigate that change. That's a really great resource for people who are approaching menopause and are interested, in getting there. But if we, I definitely want to address, um, in general, kind of like the ideas of hormonal changes and how they affect sexual health. So if we're talking postpartum, so post baby, or we're talking, pre-menopause or menopause, like what are some of the things that women can experience in their sexual lives that can be, challenging to navigate?
Yeah. So, estrogen, if we have a low level of estrogen, the estrogen really acts to be able to hydrate the tissues, and it acts to be able to kind of plump them up. So have some like good closure. So a lot of times you can have the tissues can start to be a little bit drier and more like irritated. It can almost feel like you almost get like little kind of abrasions if they're not hydrated. Um, and then you start to have trouble with, you can also have some urinary symptoms as well, because you're not having that good closure around the urethra and the structures. And then just pelvic floor dysfunction, not being able to coordinate the muscles or connect with them if they're starting to get tighter, and then constipation as well. So if we end up being constipated, so like estrogen is kind of, we want to be able to move estrogen through our bodies. And, one way is to be able to, our body kind of takes it out of the system and puts it into the stool, and we can eliminate it that way because we can get estrogen dominance too. And if we're constipated, then the stool sits there and our body starts to reabsorb the estrogen. So then we can start to get more side effects like hot flashes or sleep disturbances, things like that. But directly for like sexual dysfunction, pain, mostly pain, and being able to have an understanding of being able to work with the muscles and tissues to make sure that they are, working optimally, but then also being able to navigate, what are your options if your estrogen's low. Taking an oral estrogen is much different than taking a topical localized estrogen medication. So if you're thinking of symptoms that are more generalized, like systemic, as far as like hot flashes,
Mhm.
then you're probably going to want to be taking something like either a topical lotion or topical patch, or an oral if that's an option for you. Um, but if you're having more like pain in the pelvic floor area or the vaginal area, then like a suppository or a cream can go directly to the area and treat that area without having to have that estrogen throughout your entire system.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And now this would be more for like our menopausal population.
Yeah, or like the perimenopause as well.
What about the women who are postpartum? So say you're 6 months, 9 months, 12 months postpartum, and you're kind of ready to like jump back into bed.
Hmm.
Um, you're and you're not. So things can women who are postpartum do to to start enjoying sex again?
Yeah, so looking at hydration. So looking at a really good healthy lube because we pay attention to what we're putting into our system like food wise. And then we make sure that we don't have the plastic bottles and the BPA and all that stuff. But we
Mhm.
really need to be thinking about the same things that we're putting vaginally. So lubrication, a good healthy lubrication that doesn't have a million chemicals, doesn't have glycerin, which is put in there but it dehydrates the tissues. So, finding something that really kind of works well for you and a good system, usually if you think that you're using enough, put like 3 times more on or reapplying to make sure that you have good hydration. So you're not getting like drag on the tissue or any sort of friction.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you have any recommendations specifically?
So I use slippery stuff, water-based. Water-based, I find is like kind of the closest match to our vaginal microbiome. But there are silicone and there are oil-based options out there, and you just have to kind of navigate what you think is right for you. Sometimes the oil-based, like I've actually used some coconut oil based CBD suppositories and lubrications. That can be really great for people, but some people will have like a sensitivity or reaction to it. So you have to kind of figure out what's right for your body.
Right.
Um, and then you also have to kind of pay attention to if you're using condoms or if you're using sex toys to make sure that the type of lube is compatible with those materials.
Oh, yeah. Never even thought of that. That's important.
Yeah. And then, so like hydrate, and then there's vaginal moisturizers. So understanding that like a lubrication is kind of a situational type of tool use. So if you're doing like self massage or if you're having intercourse, you can use a lubrication. But there's also vaginal moisturizers that are more of like a daily use, and that can be more of a hydrating purpose for it. And there's sometimes like even like a topical um, estrogen cream or suppository along with a vaginal moisturizer could be a good option.
Now, are these things like over the counter, or are they something that you would have to like your OB about?
Yep. So the vaginal moisturizers are over the counter. Um, any sort of like estrogen creams are going to be a prescription, but
Mhm.
they also have bioidentical um, options out there that are over the counter as well. So, what you want to be looking for with the bioidentical is they're created in a lab. They are recreating the hormones, whether it's estrogen or progesterone, and they are a less of a dose. So they're not as strong, and you just have to make sure that do your research before you go ahead and start using those to make sure that they have in them what they say they have in them.
Yeah, that's definitely important. And now, do you think like in general that OBGYNs will be kind of willing to give out this kind of advice?
Yeah. Sometimes, I found just, mentioning it to the client and having them go ask that question. But typically, I've found most OBs are going to kind of understand this. And I used to send my clients be like, well, you're having these symptoms. Why don't you go talk to your person, whoever that is, about maybe getting hormone tested? And I've, heard a lot more recently that the preferred first steps are not to get tested. A lot of times when you get hormone tested, it's really kind of a snapshot of what's happening that day and that time of day.
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily that indicative of what's going on in general. So sometimes the hormone testing can be good if you started something, like you've started a prescription, or some sort of like plan that you have in place
Mhm.
to start to balance and regulate. Then you can kind of get tested at specific, like, thought out periods and times to be able to see if it's effective. But a lot of times people, they'll be treating according to your symptoms. So kind of listening to, is it vaginal pain? Is it, painful intercourse? Or is it more the hot flashes? Or is it like the weight gain? So kind of looking at what's more systemic or what's more localized, and then coming up with, trying to figure out if it seems like progesterone or if it's estrogen, and what kind of balance or flip it's on. And sometimes they'll kind of, start with one treatment and just see how it's going, and then they can add in the next layer accordingly.
Now, do you, as far as like nutrition and supplementation go, do you recommend, obviously like seeing someone like a nutritionist would be helpful for, diet things, but also for supplements. So do you ever like recommend things like ashwagandha, like certain kind of herbs to kind of help with that?
Yeah, so there is, like, I'm learning and absorbing as much as I can, but there's a whole lot of information out there that I am not an expert in and by any means. So I definitely rely on nutritionists, and am always looking for a good nutritionist to be able to refer to. I can get people kind of started thinking about certain things, because there's even like what is it called? Seed cycling that came
Yep.
up recently.
Yeah.
And so, getting different, like, kind of hormone, I can't think of the word right now, but like hormone driven foods that will help increase different hormones. Flax seeds are always great um, for fiber as well.
Mhm.
But thinking about your nutrition and how you can support your hormones that way, absolutely. And then also, especially like if you're kind of starting to develop some food sensitivities into this like perimenopause phase, really starting to kind of sort that out, because your body will change what you can tolerate, and you'll start, people start to notice, IBS and things like that during this change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really good resource that I have looked into and used before is Dr. Aviva Ram. And
I've heard of that name.
she actually used to work in the Berkshires, I think, actually, like in your neck of the woods. And she is an herbalist and she's an MD and she's also a midwife. So she's
Okay.
like an expert in women's health, all things women's health. So Dr. Aviva Ram, she's written some excellent books and she has tons of resources, like real time stuff on her website. So she's a really, really great option for women that are going through some hormonal changes. Um, so now, if we could just shift a little bit and talk a little bit about like sexual health during pregnancy. Is it common? Do you often see people coming in? Do you have people coming in to see you that say that sex during pregnancy is changed, or things have changed pelvic floor wise? And what strategies do you offer them to help to remedy that?
So, sex during pregnancy can be different. I don't often have people come to say that, because if they're not enjoying it, they're usually not going to do it. Or sometimes it's a good
Even
uh, pain reliever for some people. So it depends on kind of what's happening. But typically, you've got some good healthy hormones going during pregnancy, and everything's kind of plump, and circulation's great. It's usually, seeing people postpartum, or with hormonal changes in the perimenopause phase, that are having pain. And again, I think I probably didn't finish answering your question, but so looking at the lubrication, but also looking at balancing out the muscle. So, if there's tension, being able to relieve that and give them tools to be able to do that themselves. So dilators are often used, dilators or a vibrator or a wand, some sort of tool if that type of pelvic floor muscle release is helpful for them, and teaching them how to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really important. Now, do you recommend a timeline? So if you see women in postpartum, so say they're like, a few weeks postpartum, they're coming to see you for the first time, and they're like, when is it like safe for me to get back into sexual intercourse? And when am I going to enjoy it again? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like,
So yeah, so I mean, I leave that up to their medical person.
mhm.
And typically people get cleared at that 6 week mark to be able to have penetrative intercourse, if that's what we're talking about. So I don't necessarily clear them for that, and I don't do internal work until they've been medically cleared as well. I certainly see people before that 6 week mark because there's all, we've talked about it. There's a lot of other things and pieces and building pieces that we can be working on. But there's can be a lot of discussion around position as well. So especially if like maybe there's been a little bit of prolapse or some shifting of the organs, trying to figure out different pelvic angles or positions where they can be in a little bit better control and have better breath control and support, or just even angles. It really depends on what's going on.
Yeah, so communication then is like of the utmost importance. And
Yeah. And what?
having options.
Yes. Yeah. And, especially in like that postpartum period, like you said, like they may be cleared at 6 weeks, but may not be wanting it. We've got so many touch things happening to our body. We may be a little sensory overloaded.
Mhm.
And, I always kind of point out, it almost feels like, it's something else that you need to do. And always trying to get people to like, just like flip it on themselves and say it's something that they deserve. It's something that they've earned, and they should, have some sort of pleasure and be able to enjoy that. So see, just changing the mind frame a little bit sometimes can be, just take the pressure off and the like, the to-do list out of it.
Now, what about women who are breastfeeding? Do you find that they have like a harder time returning to sexual intercourse or like some kind of pelvic floor normalcy postpartum rather than women who don't?
So I don't think I've necessarily seen a correlation with like painful intercourse with breastfeeding. Um, because but there's definitely certainly different changes going on. So the biggest thing that I see like direct connection to breastfeeding is that we have still some instability issues. Um, so that's probably the biggest connection that I would make with breastfeeding. But
Yeah, like more
um,
relaxing.
yeah, yeah, and just kind of they've got some pelvic pain, like more orthopedic kind of stuff going on, and they're just having a hard time finding good core support and like hip strategies, those kinds of
So,
things.
and do you, for the women who, have that pelvic floor dysfunction postpartum, do you ever like, do they ever ask you for advice on like how to address it with their partner? Because I feel like sometimes, even things like urinary incontinence, they can be, or prolapse can be like almost kind of taboo to talk about even with your partner. I've definitely had
Hmm.
clients say that, that they don't feel like that's something that their, partner wants to hear. And so as unfortunate as that is on a basic level, it's definitely like it's a harder topic to navigate than, just saying like, hey, let's, let's go. It's just like a difference. Like, well, there's a little bit more complicated, especially like first time moms.
Yeah. So, um, was your initial question about um, do I involve the partner in like treatment, or try to ask that question again for me, please?
How to, I guess, how to help the woman like navigate her communication with her partner as far like as far as sexual health relates to her pelvic floor dysfunction. So like how much does she share with her partner, and how much, does she say like, I need more time, or how much does she, you know what I mean? Like how does she address it? It's hard to like address things that are maybe like a little bit embarrassing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it can be very different. So, like someone who's not really interested in it, they might want to use you as as an excuse, or use me as an excuse to be like, no, I'm not ready. Or yeah. Which is fine. Go ahead. You can use me
Yeah,
excuse.
totally. Like,
Because I don't think that you should, if you're not ready and that's not of interest, that's, you need to honor that and be able to find, like you said, ways to communicate that you feel confident in doing. But certainly, like if there are some strategies that I'm working on with that client, like if they are, want to be able to return to intercourse, I have taught their partners on how to do those techniques. I've had them come in and kind of just educate them on all kind of what's going on and what they can consider. There are I don't know why I just thought of this, but there are different tools too, because sometimes just the deep penetration can be like what really hurts. And they have, it's called the ONA. It's like kind of like a ring, and it has like different depths to it that
oh,
can go at the base of the penis, and it basically keeps it from going in too deep to the point of where it's uncomfortable, but then you're not having to think about measuring things or monitoring things while you're
right,
having intercourse.
right. Yeah, because the last thing you want is like other things to focus on.
Yeah. And for some people that that bringing in their partner into that piece of it doesn't jive for them. They want to have that kind of separation of like this kind of medical clinical treatment thing, and they want to keep it separated from their like arousal, passionate intimacy.
Hmm.
So some people it works great for, and that partner wants to support them, and it's great, and other people it's not a good fit. So
Now, do people see you? Do they come to see you specifically because they're having, pain with sex during times of hormonal changes?
yeah, yep. Or not even hormonal changes. Sometimes just the pelvic floor tightness can cause pain. And there's a lot of things to be working on, looking at the breath, looking at lubrication, looking at positions, looking at the pelvic floor muscle coordination, um, and then also breaking down that whole arousal and libido piece. Like it can just be like, well, why don't I want it? And kind of looking into that autonomic nervous system and self-regulation. If you're in that go 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 all the time, it's really hard. You have to be kind of in that middle. You can't be too low in that autonomic nervous system, that rest and digest and chill, and you can't be too high in that fight or flight. So you got to kind of figure out what things get you into that common ground, and then figuring out, like, for everybody it's different, like what kind of touch, what stimulates you and what kind of gets you in the mood. Because if you've got tension and you're having pain with intercourse, one, your brain is going to protect you. It's going to anticipate that pain, and it's going to start to tense up, and it's going to be working against you. So being able to kind of, balance that out and have, sometimes I will say, like, let's work through this and get you to a certain point where you can tolerate this dilator size that's, slightly larger than your partner. And then you have the confidence going into it that I know I can tolerate this. I've got some breathing strategies. I have the words to communicate with them to be able to know when we need to take a pause or change something up. So yeah, sometimes you have to spend time with yourself and figure out kind of what's going on. And then, being able to know how big your clitoris is. So this is my clitoral
Didn't
model.
even know.
And and it is not, so this is like the little button that we all think that it is. And then we have kind of like the clitoral hood, and then all the rest of it is kind of underneath. Let's see. get rid of my organs here. Okay. So all the rest of it, if I put it, so here's the bottom of the pelvic floor, the vaginal opening, and the urethra. So here's the clitoral hood up here. And so if you can see where the clitoris lines up, it has these legs that come down, and it comes all the way down along the kind of the sides of the labia. So just being aware of that and knowing that you can give some nice stimulation all the way down here, doesn't always have to be here,
Hmm.
can be a game changer.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, I had actually had when I did my pain-free sex to orgasm, because I mean that's the biggest thing. It's like, okay, so we have pain, let's work through that, but can we orgasm? Because we don't have to stop at pain free, right? That's kind of doing a disservice. Like let's enjoy this, right? And the clitoris is only there for pleasure. It's its only job. though I actually had a discussion, kind of like a loose discussion recently, that, well, orgasms can have this kind of healing effect. Like if you've got headaches, or like, have an orgasm, see if you feel better.
Mhm.
And it helps, like you're having if you've got muscle tension, it helps to, you're having a full spasm and then a full release. So it can help with your muscle tension. So maybe the clitoris's hidden purpose is for healing and pain management. We just don't know. But yeah, I mean, I had talked about it in that during that segment, and I had shown a picture of it and said that that's how big it is. And then during the question and answer, someone's like, so how big is it really? I know you showed that picture. I'm like, no.
Life size.
Yeah.
Get away.
Yeah.
So now, what did you have any like further advice about like how to then reach orgasm? So we've passed the pain point, we've worked our way through that with whatever strategies we've utilized, and then how do you get yourself to that point where you're having an orgasm?
Yeah, so playing around with different touches, figuring out, and it may change, be different at different situations, but playing around with like light touch, fast touch, deep pressure, light pressure, vibration, all those different stimuluses, external stimulation versus internal stimulation. Sometimes, just having a practice of, like arousal is really important. Okay. So not just kind of like, all right, in your mind, you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go for it and get it done with. And I mean, so arousal is our body's natural way of being able to open and have penetrative intercourse. So, if we're not fully aroused, then it's not going to be comfortable, even if someone's not experiencing muscle tension or dysfunction or pain,
Mhm.
typically. So, giving yourself time to be able to get fully aroused and being able to start to discover what does that for you. So maybe like the lighting, get the lighting in the right way, get some music on, like sometimes having like even just like a visual stimulation or like an auditory stimulation can help, like play on the different senses to get you in the mood.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And then I think like, it can be a little bit difficult, like if you're having a hard time getting there and stimulated in the first place, like maybe your partner's into it but you're not quite there yet, or you're nervous for whatever reason, and then getting to the point where you're like, okay, it's taking me a really long time to get there, and then you start like overthinking it. Do you have like any strategy to sort of like quiet the mind?
Yeah, so again, that's kind of tuning into that autonomic nervous system. I think those are the strategies that you have to kind of play around with, because it can be very different for
Hmm.
people. But I think sometimes like having some sort of visual, so like it doesn't have to be like hardcore porn or anything, but like some sort of like visual or auditory like stimulation in the background, to kind of keep you in that mode and that time frame,
Hmm.
um, can be helpful. Um, I had another thought and I lost it. I'll circle back to it, but
I know we've mentioned like the breathing strategies in previous weeks,
oh,
but
that
yeah.
was it. Thank you. So if you think about like you're trying to relieve tension and you're trying to kind of bring that nervous system down, a long, slow, like prolonged exhale and like diaphragmatic breathing can be helpful. Now, on the flip side, if you're trying to get aroused, a quicker type of breathing pattern can be helpful. So, and like vocalization. So, trying to, explore a little bit and be okay with maybe shorter, quicker respirations and like different sounds can be helpful.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting, like how important, our breathing strategies are for like so many different things. Especially when it comes to the pelvic floor, because of how intimately like they're connected, the diaphragm and pelvic floor and that whole system, plus how it's connected to our nervous system. Like I find that fascinating. And I think that, stress is like just at the forefront of like everything today. Everyone has their different reasons, but everyone is so much more stressed than we ever thought we could be. Like I thought I was stressed last year. No, this year is like a whole nother level. And so I think when we acknowledge how stressed we really are and how much we're always in that like fight or flight mode, it's then you can say, okay, I'm acknowledging that and now I'm going to have to address it. Because I think like a lot of women, I mean, I definitely see this a lot. I do this myself. You're super stressed and you're always like, trying to do the next thing and you never take time to just like chill out. And but you're in total denial about it. You're like, I'm fine. Everyone's asking you okay? Yeah, I'm good. I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine. It's just our like instinct to just say like, no, I'm absolutely fine. Whereas I feel like honestly, men are not as likely to say that. Like if they're stressed, a lot of times they just say, I'm really stressed. Like I can remember growing up and my dad would say, oh, I'm just really stressed. I have a headache. And I think I just would never acknowledge that. I mean, every once in a while, I've gotten better at it to say like, okay, I'm stressed out and, but it affects everything about your body. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
So I think even acknowledge,
So go have an orgasm.
gotta
I'm gonna be on this like campaign for orgasm for healing.
just like, it's so, I think that, women get sort of like our needs are like somewhat marginalized, because we do so much and a lot of it's behind the scenes. A lot of it is like low level, just making sure that like everyone is alive in our families. And I think that we sort of put ourselves in the back burner. I see that like a lot in both, pregnancy, postpartum, and also in, pre-menopause and menopause and post-menopause, all these stages, we face these like different, stressful challenges in our lives, but we tend to like sort of put ourselves like, no, I'll do that when I have time for it, or I'll make myself priority when we have time for it. And it goes for the high level things like, exercise and things that you would do on the daily, but then it also goes for the things that, are like more intimate and private. So like your sexual health, like we just sort of push it back and say like, it's fine. It's just something I have to do. When it's like you said earlier, no, like you deserve to have, to take pleasure in things like that and things like that are meant to be pleasurable. Like we're literally designed, engineered that way to experience pleasure. So it's, I definitely think it's important for women to hear that.
Yeah. And to be able to, these major transitions in life, I think we just like weather them, but I think the more that we know, like, how the hormonal changes affect our bone health, how they affect our cardiovascular health, how they affect our ligaments and our like our collagen, and that we can start to have these shoulder and bicep and glute and like all these different dysfunctions like when we hit they call it like the 50-year-old shoulder. um so like we have these kind of things that are showing up. Like let's start, and we know that like strength training is like the number one, like some cardio as well, But strength training is really, beneficial to help combat a lot of these things. So let's get a really good hip strategy. Let's get a really good shoulder. Let's get good posture now, and just be able to I think, like enjoy and like honor these transitions rather than dreading them and being like, what the F, you know?
I know, and I think it really is just like it's taking the time to educate yourself, and look into resources, that you can find, and actually start reading the books or read the blogs or read or watch whatever you have time to watch. I mean, most of the people, like the two resources that I mentioned, Dr. Christiane Northrup and Dr. Aviva Ram, they have really very active social media pages and websites and blogs. And so to just take time to like listen to some things that are like, it's just like a little bit of wisdom to, give yourself that chance of like, maybe it isn't a time that I need to be like freaking out about. Like I keep thinking about postpartum because I'm so close to having my baby. I'm like, oh my gosh, postpartum was hard. This is my fourth baby. And it's like, I'm still like, oh my gosh, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard time. But I'm also now like currently gathering all my resources to say like, okay, postpartum, if I have, when I have this issue, I'm going to do this. When I have this issue, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to, gather up my people and they're going to support me. And I know I'm going to be supported. So it's preparing as opposed to like being in denial of like, kind of treating your body, less than ideally, and then kind of just dealing with the consequences after because, you can't be bothered to do what you need to do in the first place in anticipation.
Yeah. And then yeah, and you just be armed. You've got your resources. Absolutely. And I mean, I knew two was my max. So more power to you. You're gonna do great. And yeah, like just having your team, that's really important.
Yeah,
Um,
able to like have that moment where you ask for help and you ask for information. So I mean, doing that I think is like definitely the first step to making, giving yourself a better quality of life, which I think is sort of the running theme that we've had throughout all of these live streams is like, it's about quality of life. It's about keeping your body in, such a state that you're able to, enjoy every day, that you're able to do things to the fullest extent of your abilities, as opposed to just like kind of dragging yourself through life super stressed and, disillusioned with your body. So, we only get one body, and it's so important, I think, to really treat it well when we have the opportunity to do so. And there's so many resources now as compared to even like, 15, 20 years ago that we can definitely take advantage of. So, with that being said, I think you and I are more than happy to be resources for women who want that support, on a general level and on a very specific, one-on-one level. So if anyone, is interested in what we're talking about, or has questions about this live stream or previous live streams, please feel free to reach out to us privately, and we're more than happy to support you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we're gonna take a short break on these live streams. Short
To
break.
have a baby, not me.
So but yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely looking forward to doing more, and open to suggestions on, what we could talk about in the future. But meanwhile, just know that we're all here and ready to help you in any way that we can.
Awesome. Thanks, Nora.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. It was fun as always. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.